Okay, beautiful. Well, welcome everyone. This June 14th to the Durham Community Safety and Wellness Task Force. We're so glad you're here, those on the screen and those in our community. It is a joy to serve our Durham community. I am sorry to say that our wonderful co-chair, Xavier Cason, is not going to be with us tonight. He had an unexpected family responsibility. So on we go. May we operate tonight in an environment of grace. So as we begin every meeting with a value, I offer the value of respect. And I do that because as I read the recommendations and I reviewed all the good work you all are doing, one of the things that is just foundational to all of our recommendations is listening. And one of the Asmin Johnson from Prescriptions for Repair is here to share with us, and she'll say it again, but one of the foundations, one of the major guidelines for listening is to listen to understand and not to respond, which my colleague Ken Rose once said, is that the essence of respect or what? And I agree. You have to respect the whole person, not just a part. And so can we agree together that the value that will hold us together and will guide our work tonight is respect? Good, thumbs up, nods. Okay, great. Fantastic. Well, let's just get going. We've got at least 3 great recommendations to review. And also we have the honor of listening and learning about how Prescriptions for Repair is doing. This was a pilot program that came from us, came from the task force and has been funded by both the Duke Institute for Health Innovations and the City of Durham with the funds that the task force had been promised. So I will turn it over to my friend and colleague, Asmin Johnson. Welcome to the Safety and Wellness Task Force.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight to share and give updates about Prescription for Repair. I am blown away and just hopeful and energized every day by the work. And I just want to take a little time to offer some of that gratitude today. That's a value that I've brought with me. And so first, I just want to say thank you for the intentionality and the respect of the whole person that you guys provided in the proposal for the listening sessions for Prescription for Repair. Proposal to program can be 2 different things sometimes, but we have been able, through the values of flexibility, collaboration, and understanding, to be able to maintain program integrity and be fiscally responsible. So for that, I am grateful. And my last gratitude combines a few different folks, and hopefully you are in these categories as well. I know that you are, but this is for the folks listening at home. I want to offer deep gratitude and appreciation for everyone who has taken the time to share or promote this program. As a Durham resident, I am often frustrated by different programmings and different things in our city, and the city does not know. To me, that defeats the purpose. So when you take the time to share and promote Prescriptions for Repair, whether it's on your Facebook page or your listserv or in your communities or hanging it at your churches or your place of business, that is how the word gets out. So I invite us all and encourage us all to continue to spread the word. And I am super grateful for our participants who have been vulnerable and trusting that they can bring their whole self to the listening session to share some of the most horrifying and tragic things besides gun violence, which is already devastating and horrible, and be able to contribute in a meaningful way and feel empowered and give us wisdom as a Durham community. So I just want to offer that out as my gratitude and my appreciation, and now give some updates. Today, and hopefully I won't talk too fast, break out a little bit more about what our listening sessions are and how the flow is, and then share a little bit more about circle process. Prescriptions for Repair is a collaboration, one-year pilot with Duke Health, Duke Institute for Health Innovation, NCCU School of Social Work, and also Restorative Justice Durham and our Community Safety Wellness Task Force. And those are all of our named entities. And then our facilitators in and of themselves are an entity as well, because they are community volunteers. Well, they get paid $25 an hour. Marsha totally stop saying volunteers. To be able to hold space in these circles. And our facilitators range from undergraduate students, stay-at-home moms, all the way to licensed clinical therapists. Everything we do is in circle because Prescription for Repair uses a restorative justice approach to ask the questions. And our core questions are: what happened? What were you thinking and feeling then and now? Who was affected and how? And what needs to be done to make things as right as possible? That becomes the individual prescription for repair that is then compiled and analyzed through our Duke and NCCU research teams to be able to produce back out to all of us the prescription for repair so that we can know how to respond to the effects of gun violence. The goal of our pilot is to listen and learn what survivors of gun violence need to heal. So like I said, we have circle process that's based in indigenous cultures, but it is based in community and core values. The core values for prescriptions for repair are respect for everyone involved, that is both the facilitators and the participants, acting and interacting with integrity, working in community, and deep listening with compassion. Our facilitators are not there to fix, advise, criticize, or pry. They are there to listen. And each of our survivors get up to 8 hours to be able to share their story and their wisdom. And we give that, that happens in 2-hour sessions. And so we appreciate all of the work of our facilitators and also for our survivors coming to share their wisdom. We have guidelines as well in our circle, and that is to honor the talking piece. The circle has no sides, as Marsha will say. It is non-hierarchical. It puts everyone connected in community. And we get a chance to share prompts, icebreakers, kind of get to know one another before and after we ask the questions. And so that is a really good time that has been meaningful and impactful to both the survivors and our facilitators as they sit together, knowing that they're going to hold space for tragedy, but yet they are connected by the humanity, just by beautiful humanity and the human heart and the human condition. And we're all in the same community of Durham. So that's been really powerful. We listen to understand, not to respond, but we do take the whole person. And as you know, embedded in our program, in the proposal, we have money set aside for survivor needs, self-identified survivor needs. This work is survivor-centered. So we provide reimbursement for childcare. We do Ubers or reimbursement for Uber. We are flexible in understanding that life is life. It has flowed before gun violence, it has flowed after gun violence, and we want to be there to hold that space. And that's been something that has been meaningful and impactful to our facilitators and to our survivors. And that's something I'm very proud about. And that's actually one of the things that impressed me by looking at the proposal, that the intentionality and the wisdom was embedded within. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Lessons can leave the circle, but stories cannot. That speaks to confidentiality. Sessions are recorded and they are transcribed. They are, the transcripts are looked at by our research teams, but it's de-identified. And that's something that builds in trust when we're asking people to share of themselves, but yet the whole thing is recorded. They trust that the transcripts will be de-identified because this will be public information. And gun violence, as well as all violence, it can be isolating, wrapped in guilt, fear, shame, pain. They're bearing their souls from childhood tragedies. I won't name them, but just a whole lot. And yet they're still allowing themselves to be reported, knowing that the information will be kept confidential and used as intended. So that's also program integrity that I'm grateful for. And the last guideline is to value the wisdom of participants. Asking those who are affected most what needs to be done to make things as right as possible. What supports, what resources, what do you need for your ongoing healing needs? What can Durham community members, city leaders do? The colleges, like, what can we do to wrap you? And that level of questioning leads to feelings of mistrust and hurt and pain and rejection and isolation. But on the flip side, it leads to hope and encouragement and curiosity. So these are the things that we have to hold in circle. It's the both and. And that is something that through prescriptions for repair, not just the wisdom that's going to be gleaned, but through the collaboration of all the named entities coming together, which there is a distrust for every named entity. And that's just a double-sided coin. And that's something we have to accept. But that's not something we just have to let be. No, through our actions, we get to do something that builds in that trust. And to me, that's what's been happening with prescriptions for repair. So that's how we do it. We do it in circle. And now I just want to give you some numbers, and then that'll be that. And I'll open up for questions, comments, or concerns. So to date, we have 28 facilitators that have completed 9 hours of training. 4.5 was initial training. And thank you so much, Councilwoman Caballero, for being at our training. We appreciate it seeing you. And also we do ongoing monthly reflection circles where we all get to be with one another, talk about how it's going, give any program updates and structure for moving forward to make sure we are maintaining program integrity. We have 28 survivors. We need 40, so keep spreading the word. But 7 of the 28 are referrals from other survivors. And that just speaks volumes about the trust and the commitment that we're all having together as we journey in this. 10 survivors have completed all of their listening sessions. On average, they complete 3, but they can have up to 4. 18 survivors are currently in process, and our research teams are diligently working to produce the transcripts, and they have their code book and their variable and research people talk, and they're doing an excellent job. And we have completed 24 transcriptions already. And I want to say another update that I can give is that the idea of circle and collaboration and being grounded by values is not just something that shows up in the listening session. I have circles of support. I have a research team and an operations team that also function in circles. So that's been really meaningful as we collaborate together in this great work with representatives from each entity on those support circles. And then just a few takeaways from a coordinator perspective. I wanted to say just a few things. The first is, I am blown away by the level of care, support, and deep listening that our facilitators provide our survivors in every listening session. Like I said, our facilitators range, but yet they have all grounded themselves in these values, and they have done the work for this pilot, and they are dedicated, and they are flexible in their understanding, and they give great affirmation and non-judgment in these spaces of listening. Also, our survivors, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel respected, they feel valued. And I keep saying the word feel because that's what you're going to remember. You're going to remember, how did you feel? Not what someone said. And oftentimes, You might even forget what they might have done, but how did they make you feel? And our survivors feel that way. And so does each person that has participated with us, whether you're a facilitator or a survivor. This is a survivor-centered work, like I said, and we take the whole person. And we give agency and autonomy. So oftentimes people want to tell you what you need because they have degrees or they're older or they think they have more wisdom. But who has more wisdom than you when you're the person who is the most affected? So we sit and we listen to your wisdom. We ask you for your wisdom that's going to impact policy, future legislation, organizations, programming here in Durham, where we all live, work, and thrive. And the last one I want to say is that the ripple effects are many. And just kind of summarizing a few quotes from some of our survivors. One survivor shared how it felt like coming in with 5 blankets, but session after session, those blankets were being taken off. A lot of our survivors say they feel lighter, they feel energized. They find themselves going to work talking about their gun violence story or their trauma or something that they would have never shared with strangers because they have sat and had us, their community members, hear them and listen to them. Some of our survivors have shared how they've never heard their own story. So trauma's fractured and it just rips apart so many different things. But as we sit there and we gently guide them through the questions and the deep listening, they get a chance to hear back their own story. Sometimes they say something and then a facilitator will relay it back. And they're like, yeah, it's what you said, but it's really what they said. So the affirmation goes back and forth, and that's encouraging. And then another quote, I'm sure Marsha's like, share it about one of our survivors. We're not impervious. Now, facilitators, we are bound in community, but I share with my facilitators that we are not walls. We are there. We join together, we knit our hearts together. So when my facilitator was bawling after holding that space, I spoke with the survivor and the survivor said, she was bawling. And I said, and how did that make you feel? It was appropriate. It was appropriate because I myself have cried so many tears. And to have such and such sit there and feel that connection, it was just mind blowing. And so that's the work that we do. And I just wanted to kind of paint a picture for you all and give some updates on how it's going. It's going great. It's going great. And I'm so grateful and hopeful, energized by this work. And I know that we are doing the right thing at the right time. And for that, I want to say thank you. My last note that I'll always leave is that this is seed time and harvest. And I just want everyone, whoever has participated with Prescriptions for Repair in whatever capacity, we all get to sit back and see the harvest. So thank you so much. And I'll open up for any questions, comments, or concerns.
Mike.
Thank you, Osmond. It sounds like the program is having the anticipated dual effect we hoped it would, that it would be healing for the participants just getting to tell their stories, and you would accumulate important information from the policy perspective. If you're willing to share, and I know you're in mid-process, so maybe you don't want to, but have any inklings of potential areas for improvement come out you want to share? And are you also keeping track of this process? Because this seems to me an incredibly successful way of doing a listening session that would be a great lesson for other entities to learn and model on other subjects, but taking this similar disciplined approach to a listening session.
Yes, thank you for that question. To your first point, I'm not a researcher. I am privy, though, to the research information, so I don't want to speak in that regard from a research perspective just yet, but coming soon. Just the anecdotal side. Thank you. And then as far as the practice of a listening session, because it's based in restorative practice, that's something that's already, like, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel on that one. So in that regard, I would say it's well documented, and then I can have other anecdotes when everything is said and done about, maybe some things that we could tweak. But no, we're just using the framework that's provided for us. The restorative framework is very flexible and open, and it has its parameters. And those parameters are the values and the guidelines. Everything in between is just the nuance of each individual person and that hard work when you're in session. So that part I can't tell you how to do, but I could show you what the parameters are so that you can execute it the best of your ability. Don't know if that answered your question, but thank you for the question.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank
very-
you. I was just going to say thank you. I know in some passing moments and conversations, people that I know in community have lifted up the Prescriptions for Repair program as so meaningful to them, and their gratitude for our work as a task force in piloting it, building up the proposal. So shout out to everyone that, was directly involved in submitting that proposal, months ago. And yeah, thank you for stewarding this important work and for sharing it here.
Thank you.
All of you all can take credit for this.
Yes.
This pilot reflects what we've learned from Dr. Boone in ACEs. This reflects what we are talking about, as when I've heard the listening sessions in our town halls, it's how do we learn from one another and respect that wisdom of our own lives, and to be able to collect that and into a powerful, I think, movement to move from punishment to repair, which is really the paradigm, the purpose, the goal of this task force. So Aspen, you're a terrific coordinator. You get everybody where they need to go. It's a lot of moving pieces. And in our reflection circle, our facilitation reflection circles are just it feels just downright righteous, just so helpful, just how do we be our best selves. So thank you so much. You'll have to come back again.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks
When
for
it's
having
finished. Okay, good.
I really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for the intentionality and the wisdom. And thanks for all you do in our community to help our Durham be a better and safer place to live, work, and play. All right. Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
bye.
Appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
Super. So now we have the work of recommendations. We're entering our last 5 months of service on the task force. And so we are now in recommendation mode. And the first one is from the criminal legal system. And it is about abuse, neglect, and dependency court. And these recommendations, one thing that I do want to say is how much I appreciate the depth and breadth of these, how these recommendations are formed and created. They come from us. They come from the people that all of us, they're personal and they're collective. And so that makes it all the more authentic and powerful. So I'd like to turn this over to Jatoya. Will you share the abuse, neglect, and dependency court recommendation with us?
Yeah. Hey, y'all. Good to see everyone. Glad to be here. So I would like,
You want me to have it up on the screen while you're talking for everybody else, or are you good just talking it through?
you can have it up. I'm just gonna do like an overview.
Okay. I won't put it up unless anybody else feels the need. Then keep going.
Okay, cool. So
You should go with, pardon me, for folks that are watching that may not have access to it, I think you should go ahead and share it.
Thanks. We'll do.
So-
So Rose, if you can give me sharing, and I'll do it. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Go for it,
Jesse.
Jatoya.
I can go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I would like to present Oh, you made my screen go crazy. I would like to present this Durham Social Services and Abuse, Neglect, and Dependency Court Reform proposal to y'all. As it is very dear to me being a parent who was forcefully separated from my children. But not only does this mean a lot to me, it's also for future families who may encounter DSS involvement and to really give them a fair chance if they are wanting to regain custody of their children. These reforms are for our community, especially our Black, brown, minority families who are normally hyper and overly surveilled by a system who hasn't shown us support in allowing our people to have a rejuvenating, revitalizing, and nurturing experience. In Durham, 64% of children investigated by CPS are Black. This proposal is to ensure that DSS and the entire child welfare system respects family integrity, stops unnecessary family separation, and to start providing a more effective, resourceful, and shortened time frame when it comes to family involvement. While North Carolina is supposed to stand by law as being a reunification state, my own experience and those of others have shown that to be untrue. With the assistance of Mike, Marsha, and Muffin, our CLS roundtable, and I have met with many stakeholders that are listed within our proposal that have contributed to these lists of reforms. Durham is the second slowest county in North Carolina to achieve reunification of separated families, with children in care for a median of 677 days. 7 out of 10 children are still in custody after 720 days in Durham County. My children alone were in custody for over 1,825 days. We are requesting approval of these reforms, which include providing a collaborative and communicative process between DSS, guardian ad litems, and the A&D court that is restorative to allowing a family to thrive with the necessary support they need, prioritizing family placements as people's families should have right to their own kin over non-biological adopted families, ending extended court continuations which prolong family separations and induce trauma, increased visitations, allowing families to have more time together and allotted hours outside of normal business or working hours, amongst other very important recommendations as listed. So I would just greatly appreciate y'all's support as we just keep to fight to keep Durham safe and families whole. And that's my piece. I don't know if everybody got this prior to. It's a lot of information in it. It's a lot of recommendations that I didn't just say right now. But yeah, I'm just hoping y'all vote for it.
We did. Yes, please, Jennifer.
Sorry for the pause. My cat is sitting on my computer. So this is really impressive. It's really thorough. I love this. Thank you so much for the work that you've put into this. This has my full support. I had 2 suggestions that I wanted to offer, recognizing that these may have already been discussed, and this might be a moot point. But one that I wanted to note, I was glad to see, let me pull it up on my end. There was a note about continuing to observe outcomes while this was happening. So I don't need to go through my inbox, but there was a note about like monitoring outcomes, things like that. I think that's very important. I would also suggest writing into the recommendation maybe even just like a point in time qualitative assessment of the changes. And part of the reason why I suggest that is that what drew my attention to it was the bullet point about rotating judges through courts to avoid burnout and to avoid, you phrased it differently, but basically just like, habits of procedure forming that are sort of like supra to whatever the law should be. That's a really good recommendation. But we also know that sometimes we also know that sometimes like unexpected consequences could happen. And so nothing egregious, but like perhaps we might have a judge who feels like they aren't prepared enough or something like that. So that basically helps us catch little glitches in the new system and improve them and just make sure that everything is running smoothly. So, just having a point maybe 6 months in or a year into some of these proposed changes to be like, just, have someone, city intern, whoever, just like interview some judges, interview some social workers, interview some parents, all the play, just be like, how's it going? and kind of catch me that. The second thing that I wanted to suggest was in addition to the bullet point about increasing access to facilities for drug testing. Perfectly fair and very, very appropriate. People that are court mandated to do drug testing should absolutely have very easy and convenient access to those particular services. But I also want to note that while we cannot tell judges what to do, they are judges, they get to decide whatever they want to do. There is no clinical purpose for drug testing anyone. There is no safety purpose for drug testing anyone. Whatever is in your urine does not in any way necessarily indicate anything about you, your biology, your behavioral health status, your parenting skills, or the safety of your home. The sole purpose of drug testing in court environments and in family courts is punitive. So I think it bears stating that, again, we can't tell judges what to do. And I know you guys have thought about this a lot more than me, but I wouldn't hate seeing something in there that was like, the drug testing is usually punitive and there should be a very good reason for doing it. But if you're going to do it, despite all that, make sure that people can access it very, very easily. And those are my two thoughts. But thank you so much for this, truly.
Thank you, Jennifer. You anticipated my follow-up was that, the first part of the clause would be, probably shouldn't rely on them, but if you're going to do it, make it available. But the first part of the sentence is stop relying on them.
Yeah. Like, given that urine toxicology is not a reliable indicator of health, safety, substance use disorder, recovery, anything like that. They're often not worthwhile, but if you insist on doing them for punitive purposes, make it easy for people to do it.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And I think we can also build in the first point, because as you'll see in there, we have a kind of general area of recommendations that DSS and the A&D court needs to build in more accountability and transparency and reporting of information. So I think that would be an appropriate place to add your suggestion about when you make these changes, there should be periodic assessment and reporting of the results of them that's publicly available. And that's consistent with other recommendations we have in that general theme.
There's been some questions about whether we vote tonight or not. I think that it would be, since Xavier's not here, and this is a very dense, there's a lot here in this recommendation and the other recommendations. I think it would be just fine to wait until then, let this not necessarily be a formal first reading and then a second reading, but that we just wait for Isaac and the other, folks that in Alejandra and Xavier to just wait until July so that we have time to do a little bit more digesting. And also, Mike, you put in your notes that we have yet to hear from DSS. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. If we can get some statistics, I'll put them in. But yeah, that'd be Toya and Muffin can opine. That's fine with me, as long as we'll have a busy agenda July. But so hopefully the follow on and the vote can be very brief, because we'll have a lot of new stuff to get to in the July meeting.
Exactly.
So if we didn't vote tonight, July would be a very quick. All right, anything new? Vote, and then we can move on to all the new stuff.
Right. Does that sound good with y'all? To just I really would like to integrate your comments, Jennifer, and just let people have some time to do a second or third or fourth reading and then vote at our next meeting. Jesse.
Yeah, I'm just checking in with the folks that were most involved. Are there any kind of time sensitive considerations that you're mindful of with what you're recommending. I'm seeing Mike shake his head no. Others, just to be certain.
I'd like to hear Toya. What do you think?
You said, is there anything that's time sensitive? Like regarding
Mhm.
voting, like tonight versus July?
Mhm.
Yes,
Besides
for
getting
sure.
Look, besides getting people their kids back faster, then no, nothing else.
No, I feel that. Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful to hear. Before we met, if there are some additional like changes that you might end up making just in terms of additional that have yet to happen. I'm all for an additional reading. My understanding, hopefully, I got to notice that my connection is unstable. My understanding is that based on our collective process, because you're not submitting a proposal with a budget or with sort of specific hiring or staffing expectations or requests, that we don't have to go through our typical process of 2 readings and a vote. And I think we want to make sure collectively we feel ready to offer agreement. I love that our body is the kind of group that really wants to have unanimous support. I struggle to say that word sometimes. And so making sure we have our ducks in a row and whatnot, if an extra month over the summer will help us put forth a proposal that's stronger and better. I'm all for waiting, but really want to trust you all that are kind of in the driver's seat. Like, we're in the car with you and we're happy to ride along. But y'all are closest to this, and so your feedback feels important. So if you're cool waiting, and I'm cool waiting, so that we can make it better and feel more confident, because there are a lot of things that I'm not as familiar with just because of my experience, but or lack thereof, I should say. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this particular recommendation. But at first glance, the energy of it resonates for sure in terms of being person-centered, family-centered at that, and really trying to provide care in spaces and systems that often end up doing more harm. So thanks for your work on it, y'all.
Great. So, folks, we can just do a thumbs up or down. Let's integrate comments, Jennifer's comments, have some time for further reflection and vote next month. Good? Thumbs up, thumbs down? I would love for all of our folks to be here. Great, thanks. All right. Dynamite, we'll do that. So the next recommendation is from Jesse. I think you're presenting. This is the proposal for implementing wellness practices and restorative practices for youth and adults serving youth. And this came out of the SRO roundtable and a combination of youth. So it's a beautiful blend of both.
Yeah, transparently, for folks who may not remember, we added an additional roundtable committee that focuses on youth. And in checking in with them, it felt like a strategic partnership and alignment to partner on this particular proposal. Also, transparently, this proposal really adapted and evolved from the previous proposal that we approved, which was supporting mental health wellness retreats for DPS stakeholders, for students and for staff. So you'll see kind of that we wanted to take, to use the word that we've been using, to draw a larger circle and be a bit more expansive, to think about not just what was happening at the retreat, but additional wellness and restorative practices that would be useful, and thinking not just about young people and adults serving young people within the Durham Public Schools context, but wanting to think about young people and adults serving young people in other spaces and places that are in Durham. I think it's been a dynamic process, transparently, admittedly. I didn't expect to see the proposal evolve, but I'm grateful that it has, because I think what we are suggesting is still in the spirit of our work. But this actually hopefully casts a clearer vision for the kind of work. So it's less of, in some ways, and more of the how. It's a bit meta, but in order to do a better job of implementing wellness practices and restorative practices, we have to really model that and embody that. We can't ask or expect young people or teachers in classrooms to lean into restorative practice when they're in the middle of a classroom experience or something, if we can't model it here. So I really love that we had Asmin talking about prescriptions for repair and really providing the same kind of grounded understanding within restorative justice. And so this is all in alignment. I can share my screen, or Rose, do you want to share your screen? Does it matter? I can just share.
Matter. If you have
Okay.
it up, go ahead and share it.
Great. So recommendations for implementing wellness practices and restorative practices for youth and for adults serving youth. We named all of the bodies that have brought us here, the city, the county, and the school. We spent some time intentionally with the director of Durham Public Schools Office of Equity Affairs, Kelvin Bullock, and the director of the Office on Youth, Laura Khalil, has been really involved in just, I think, paying close attention to what our task force has been doing, especially as it relates to young people. And so it made a lot of sense to check in with them as we were trying to figure out how we could evolve the original idea around retreats. And in conversation with them, again, this notion of really trying to make sure that we are accurately and consistently modeling what restorative practice and wellness practice can look like, and doing so in a way that allows there to be contact and exposure to these experiences, both in a school context and out of a school context. And so with the Office of Equity Affairs, they're really responsible for professional development. And so it feels like a great chance to see them partner with organizations within DPS and hopefully even outside to provide adults serving youth within DPS the skills, the training to better understand and model wellness and restorative practices in school settings. Additionally, we want to see that practice and praxis happen outside of school settings. And that's where we thought that the Office on Youth could be a really great partner in modeling what engagement with youth can look like. And one of the big parts of this is really transparently making sure that our highest stakeholders in this sort of hierarchical arrangement of decision making are in agreement that this is worth prioritizing. I think, again, transparently and openly, it felt challenging to invite some of these stakeholders within these organizations to partner and cooperate with us if decision makers above them wouldn't be in agreement. We would kind of just be stuck. And so before we take a seed and put it in the ground, so to speak, we want to make sure that the ground is ready for it. And the ground really won't be ready until the current decision makers at the highest level. And in my mind, that's our electeds and their chief executive officers. So the city manager, the county manager, and the superintendent, are able to really have some agreement and clarity around like where and how do we come together around this? What are we willing to actually mutually invest in, and what can that look like? And so moving forward, our proposal is just focused on that sort of in school and out of school impact. So again, reiterating data-driven support for implementing more wellness and restorative practices within and beyond Durham Public Schools. And again, bring attention to the misuse of restorative practices and to the potential assets to address this misuse more effectively. In our listening sessions, we often heard that restorative practices were being named, that people would refer to them nominally, but in practice, it was still very punitive based. It was not like what Asmin described earlier with prescriptions for repair. In some cases, it's just been the same old kind of ISS arrangement, but it's called restorative practice. And so really want to see our electeds, our key leaders, in these important spaces, commit to and invest in a more accurate and effective implementation of these kinds of practices. And again, we think that starts with us. We can't ask other people or expect other people to model this kind of practice and behavior if we're not able to do it in real time or able to see our leaders do it in real time. So I'm hopeful that there'll be more conversations, both privately and publicly, formally and informally, where we can see that modeling happening, and hopefully see where there is consensus to mutually invest in some kind of implementation. Just scrolling for others who might read, we named the DPS strategic plan, the governor's task force report, the racial equity task force report, the youth listening project report, as other related reports that really align with our recommendations. So I think our data supports this. It's helpful to know that there are other folks who are committed to important work serving our communities that also align. One point of feedback that we got when we did our retreats was that our expert consultations were not as inclusive of people in DPS. And so we really took that to heart and tried to make sure that we engaged, again, stakeholders within DPS and outside. And so that's represented here to the best of our ability. There are some we consulted with, but I didn't get confirmation to include them. And so I didn't want to have to ask for forgiveness because I didn't ask for permission, so to speak. So, but yeah, we're doing our best to continue listening. And again, as a point of reminder, we had 16 listening sessions. That's where we started in our work, over 13 hours across 5 stakeholder groups. Those were DPS principals, educators, support staff. So those are your counselors, your therapists, your social workers, your nurses, students and youth, and then parents and caregivers. And so our implementation details are really just for casting vision. So we have some ideas around what it could look like for on-site implementation of wellness and restorative practices in schools, primarily through professional learning and development for DPS staff. That can look like visiting classrooms, modeling accurate restorative practice behaviors, documenting and reporting data to advisory stakeholders, coordinating student-led wellness programs for the school body, leveraging partnerships with other related units when possible. And there's some other strategic groups that we've named: DPS Student Support Services, the Office on Youth again, of course, our beloved Community Safety Department, and DPS Foundation. Transparently, I got to participate in a really important restorative circle moment with some of the folks at DPS Foundation. So I'm hopeful that, again, as we figure out how to model it in real time, we're not expecting perfection, but we want to do our best to embody and model and really internalize the ideas that we're preaching. We have to practice what we preach. There's no other way around it. And again, for offsite implementations, we imagine that this could look a lot of different ways. And so without getting ahead of ourselves, some ideas were, again, coordinating community wellness retreats, providing mediation and conflict resolution for adults who have experienced harm from engagement with this line of wellness and restorative practice work, communicating effectively with community members who are most impacted by a particular crisis about a means for healing and repair. And so, again, I'm echoing what I've already said, that the prescription for repair presentation just very much highlights how meaningful it can be for folks who are encountering harm, be it gun violence or some other context, can really see restoration from that harm over time when resources, programs, spaces are made available for them to receive that kind of care. So that's really the gist. We didn't anticipate any conflicts of interest, thankfully, this time around. And I'm happy to listen, check in, receive questions, feedback, comments, concerns. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Jesse. That was great. Wanda, yes.
Hey, I think it is an awesome idea and one that is definitely needed. I'm wondering if any thought was given to the listening sessions that we had in the community, 2 in February, 3 in March, 1 in April, 1 in May, and then several coming up, and how those might be, how we can talk about that, because there's been a lot of movement in the community, a lot of that's going on, and I understand the need for this type of process in the schools. Absolutely, I do. Young people leave the schools, go into the communities, go home, and that's the piece that we're focused on. And so I'm wondering actually why conversations didn't take place with Javonya and I, or maybe even Karen Haldeman, in terms of what we've been doing and how there might be some synergies or not. So.
Sure, I appreciate the series of comments you've made. I'll do my best to respond. I think in my mind, again, this proposal is really trying to cast a vision. And so where I see the alignment, I think everything that you're doing are some specific examples of offsite kinds of engagement. So be it with TRI, be it the previous recommendation we made for the civic hackathon. I think these are all important kinds of offsite of school programs, interventions, where wellness practices are being modeled, where people are in circle and listening, where there's dignity, where there's respect, where we can really model emotional competence and active listening. And so I don't think that there's any misalignment there. And I think it was our strategy really to, like I said earlier, draw a larger circle so that it would be comprehensive and amplify other recommendations that we've made. I allude to prescriptions for repair a lot just because that felt so obvious. But again, I think the Civic Hackathon, I could lift that up as well. It's just that you didn't present for the first 15 minutes, Asmund did. So I do think I've engaged with Javania about this and about our other proposal. And I think we're in ongoing conversation about what it would look like. I think particularly for this proposal, again, transparently, you know, one of our commissioners asked, didn't the city give you $1 million? Why don't you just use that to fund something for this kind of intervention? And I was honest. And I said, well, what we were imagining was specifically for DPS stakeholders. And so it felt more sensible to go to the county and the school for funding. But then secondly, and honestly, it's the city council or the city manager's decision ultimately to use those funds. The Civic Hackathon, as you know, we had the proposal and then other decisions were made in terms of how funds. And so we didn't want, with this proposal, we recognize that in some way forms or is an example of what's off, right? That like, we're not actually talking to one another. We're not actually fully practicing this kind of restorative justice ideology where we actually listen, where we actually share power, where we actually honor someone else's lived experience. Right. And so the hierarchy, the hierarchy, excuse me, starts to then conflict with this other shape of a circle, right? And so I think again, I want to know what our leaders want. We have a vision. We've casted it as well as we can. And we're asking our leaders to buy into that vision. Yeah. And if so, where is their agreement? Is it $50,000? Yeah. Is it $500,000? Is it $5 million? Wherever there is agreement within that space, let's then work within that. And if it's a civic hackathon, if it's professional development, if it's retreats, if it's something else, if it's all of the above, within that context of agreement, we recommend operating. Because if it's outside of that, what we'll find is that the county leader is telling us, well, ask the city to pay for it. Yeah. And then the city is saying, well, why would we pay for something when the county and the school haven't put anything down and it's for them? Yeah. And now we're stuck playing back and forth instead of actually figuring out how to get the work done. Right. Yeah. And I don't think anyone here is interested in the back and forth game. Play silly games, win silly prizes. Yeah. I think we're interested in figuring out how to be effective and how to improve what our young people and our teachers and so many other caring adults are trying to do for young people. And so I want to set them up to win. And if we're starting at $10,000, $20,000, I know that's a small drop in the bucket for the budgets that, our stakeholders have, but that's where I'm at. So I'll stop there, but I really want to be honest with you, Wanda, to say that this certainly wasn't to exclude the work that you, Samuel, Karen have done. But because of time sensitive natures and recognizing that what we were doing really incorporated and hopefully amplifies and supports the kind of work that y'all and others are doing, we kept moving forward, even though we didn't hear back from you.
Didn't hear back from.
Yeah, there were some initial emails that I sent to check in and I didn't hear back. I heard back from some others. And so I worked with the folks that I heard from. Again, and that wasn't to exclude you at all.
No. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so very much. That helps a lot. And no, it's not that I felt excluded. And I didn't know that you had spoken with Javanya, and because to me, we work together, so that would be the voice, right? So, but thank you so much. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I appreciate it.
And I would just like to add, there's so much wisdom and knowledge from all those events that you all are doing, and the community listening that was led by youth. School board member Lewis, I'm so glad to see you. Thank you and Dr. Boone for that we can, I think, fold that into this recommendation, right? It's not over. It's June. We could take those notes and that knowledge, because it's powerful from the very voices of our students and families, and integrate that into the recommendation. I think would be very powerful and very meaningful and
I
very
agree.
helpful. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
it's the public needs to hear what y'all are hearing, what we're hearing. Dr.
Yeah.
Reed, tell us quickly, you mentioned a number of different events. Could you just go through those one more time so that we have a sense of the scope of public interaction or interaction with youth?
Yeah, so immediately following the Hillside performance of State of Urgency, the youth in our coalition decided that they wanted to do something. And so right after that, in February, we had 2 sessions with young people over Zoom to talk about trauma, stress, bullying, and those things that lead to violence. And we looked at data as well. So we did that twice in February. Then we widened the number of young people that were involved in these sessions, and we had 2 more sessions in March. One that had parents and youth to talk about this. We had alumni from TRI, who are now in their 20s, they started when they were 14, to talk about how their perspective of violence has changed and what they would recommend. Now one is 28, 24, 21. And then the next one that we had in March, we included emergency department docs who were concerned about gun violence from their perspective, fathers and grandparents and young families and youth all together with those same kinds of conversations. And then Javanya approached me about participating as a panelist and a trusted adult in the event that that we held together at St. Joseph's. And then Karen spoke to both of us about doing something, which was the hackathon. Yeah, that was, it was a wonderful occasion. There were some, as Jesse alluded to, some financial concerns that we were able to provide the funding necessary. And so then the idea was, okay, what are we going to do next? Will we have other sessions during the summer? And so we had that conversation. And so there are events that are scheduled in July, end of June, end of July, end of August. And we can continue because we have a youth coalition. So, that wouldn't be a problem. In July 29th, I believe it is, Deborah Farrington, who is the Director of Health and Equity at the state, is going to preside over a conversation with community members, youth and families at the Cotton, at Golden
Rim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of things in and out of that with young people that are taking place. So
Okay, that's great. It's good to know. It's good to know. So we can get that knowledge, and there's reports, right? You have reports that you've generated kind of summarizing that wisdom and knowledge. So if you could give, send that, I guess, to Jesse, then we can, and the SRO, then we will fold it into the report, and that would be great.
Yeah. And again, since Javanya, to me, Javanya is the point of contact. I didn't know that there was a conversation. I apologize, and I apologize for being inundated.
Oh, don't apologize. No. There are many moving pieces.
Yeah.
This is when we get to check in. You
Okay.
asked a fair question. I just gave a fair answer. You've done
Right.
nothing wrong.
Okay.
So we're all doing our best. And yeah, I appreciate, like I said earlier, I think if we're ready to vote on something, then great, let's vote on it. We can. The process doesn't keep us from doing that. But if we want to offer more time and make it a stronger proposal so that it names more clearly some of the work that your roundtable has done, I think it's great if 3 roundtables then are putting forth the proposal.
I think so too. There's
No consternation from me.
Yeah, great. Mike.
Well, and Jesse, your oft-repeated cautionary tale in your presentation anticipated one of my questions, and Wanda's and your back and forth kind of anticipated another, and it was that you made the point, the wise point, that school administrators at the school level or at the district superintendent, the district level, can claim that they support restorative practices, but what they actually do in practice doesn't really meet that definition. So I think this proposal, could be strengthened with, if not a rough working definition of what you think genuine restorative practices are, at least a key directive that the stakeholders need to agree on that. And perhaps a way to get at that is listing some of the best practices, and you make reference to the key community folk doing the work like Wanda, et cetera, that you can take benefit from, and that you could use the model of listening sessions like you've done and the hackathon that they've done as ways to approach how to get students and others in a school sitting around in a circle about what school safety should look like in their schools, but then also what restorative practices should actually perhaps look like as an approach to school discipline. So it seems like you're kind of getting at 2 things. One, how do the schools come together and talk about the general approach of restorative practice, but then how can it actually work day to day in a school setting as an alternative to suspension, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I was hoping, that the Javonia, might be able to reply how she thinks a, school superintendent, school, vice principals, whatever, might respond to a proposal like this. Is it broad vision enough to give them the room to implement, but not so broad that they can drive their truck any direction they want through the middle of it? And then the other tougher question is it worth even building anywhere in this proposal that if restorative practices are going to be done as an alternative to traditional discipline, they need to have some authority. In other words, the school district needs to commit that if we're going to do restorative practices, then those in charge of that needs to be written in the disciplinary policy of the district, at least in general terms, and that those in charge of enforcing discipline in the schools need to commit that they will follow what a restorative practice circle in a school says should be the outcome of some incident. They can't let them spend the time and say, well, I don't care. I'm suspending you anyway.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Note what I said in the chat, that we also have one more recommendation to get to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we should wrap up this
And-
discussion after Jesse responds, and then people can provide more feedback via the form as well.
And
It's
Mike,
a
I'd
transition.
like to
Go for it.
go ahead, Jesse. I'll respond after you.
No. I would love for you to share on record. So go for it.
Okay. So Mike, that's a really good question. I love the line of thinking that you have along with this recommendation and strengthening the recommendation as well. To your point, it comes down to the policy. It comes down to our strategic planning and those strategies that are there. What I'm looking forward to, and I know you all have touched on this before, is a strategy around, one, informing the public, and then the tour that you'll do, listening tour with the elected officials about your whole report, and then specifically with the pieces of the report. To your point, Mike, when I think about lining things up and where they need to be, when I look at these recommendations, this is aligns with strategic plan number 2 and supporting the whole child. That's policy, that's practice, that's recommendations and strategies. That's where this sits, right? So it's a matter of even lining up, is it a presentation that's done right before the administration presents on strategy 2 and where we've landed? So we are going through the 5-year strategy plan we had has been we're beyond those 5 years, and we're starting on the next strategic plan.
Mhm.
And we get regular updates throughout the year. I believe strategy 2 sometimes comes in October. So again, you all will have up the things will have it fleshed out. And that's where, again, whenever it's decided you offer to present to the different governing bodies, that's where I would say that's situated. There's the other point in the bylaws, in the formation of this group, and giving recommendations around another way of policy and operations. Is a memorandum of understanding that we have with the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
So those recommendations would come also to allow the board to have discussion and then decide what we will or will not do regarding those recommendations in the SRO MOU that comes around yearly as well. So it's just a matter of timing and landing.
So you think, Giovanni, you think it's this macro level proposal would allow the implementation of it to get to the point of, if the district is going to commit to it, they're going to make sure the disciplinary policy, the MOU, et cetera, reflects that commitment, so that on the ground in a school, it would actually have some, some teeth authority behind it, some teeth behind it.
The purpose of this work, we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But to change systems, we need to change policies.
Right.
Can I step into the next proposal?
I think you queued it up beautifully, Javonia. Let's talk about SRO MOUs. This is great. Thank you.
And just to kind of solidify that transition, one of the main parts of this recommendation around the school resource officer memorandum of understanding, the SRO MOU, is about the exact same thing: accurate and consistent implementation of restorative practices. This is a short document. I'm going best to get through it in less than 5 minutes, so we can use time to just check in about it. In my screen. So our bylaws invite us to offer feedback about this particular document, a set of documents, I should say. And so this is a 2-page proposal that very clearly lists our recommendations. There are 3, and then sort of holds those recommendations in the data. And we lifted up 4 of the 8 themes that our research advisors pulled out of our listening session data. I provided the summary. It's a 5-page document that has all 8 themes that they pulled out, and really just try to rely on the data to inform and direct our recommendations and observations that support those recommendations in this 2-page document. So the recommendations are as follows: to lift up people over policy and human wellness over law enforcement; to secondly, leverage the mental health and restorative justice assets in our community; and 3, if I had to say, it's probably most important, to formalize partnerships with the community safety department when and where possible. And so the 4 data-driven observations we lift up are saying that we need accurate and consistent implementation of restorative practices. We need to make mental health and trauma resources more available to students and staff. We need to improve the safety and security of DPS building conditions. That needs a period right there. And we need more caring adults with wellness capacity in school buildings. Those are the 4 sort of data-driven concepts that support these 3 recommendations to focus on serving people and human wellness over enforcing law and policy, to really make optimal use of the mental health and restorative justice and practice assets that we have both inside and outside of DPS within Durham, and to formalize and codify partnerships with CSD. They already have a solid working model of working with law enforcement within the city. And so we really want to champion the work that they're doing. And wonder out loud what it would look like for them to work with sheriffs in schools. What would it look like for, in a given situation, for there to be that partnership? And so that's really the heart of this proposal. We've already talked a lot about restorative practice. The MOU documents contain language that can lead to restorative practices being implemented incorrectly and inconsistently. And so we want to figure out how to set folks up for higher chances of success as it relates to restorative practice. And based on the way that the MOU is built, the SROs aren't in an ideal position to really embody and model that, particularly in incidents where there's criminal activity. They're going to enforce the law. They've sworn an oath, and they're going to commit and keep that oath. And so we won't ask them to do something that would be inconsistent with their position. They're going to do their best to move with integrity. And so, again, restorative justice, we think, is a great model. And we think CSD can model those restorative practices within schools, within school settings. I think making mental health and trauma resources more available to students and staff is kind of an obvious point, but it's worth lifting up because it's what we heard from community members, from principals, from students, from teachers, from parents. And so we want to figure out how to make things more accessible. And if CSD can partner again with SROs and DPS staff to not only change the culture and reduce the stigma, but actually provide concrete resources, information, expertise within the context of DPS, I'd love to see that. We heard from within our listening sessions that the spaces themselves, the physical spaces, often weren't safe, where doors that should lock won't. And so people don't feel secure. And the MOU names the intention to prevent juvenile delinquency and criminal activity. And so if the space doesn't necessarily align, how can we lift that up? And what are the ways in which the Community Safety Department might be able to help inform some of those decisions, as well as other opportunities, the annual SRO Summit and other related sessions where people are making safety plans and offering guidance. And lastly, we need more caring adults in the buildings. We're not going to stand on a platform and say, get rid of SROs, because the data was not consistently saying that. Some are for SROs, some are against SROs, and some are kind of in the middle. And so the MOU explains, in the event that concerns from a staff member, student, or parent about actions of the SRO continue or persist, an SRO can be removed. And so we want to honor what the protocol is and make sure folks are aware that there is a channel for removing an SRO that is not being effective, that is causing harm. But if a SRO is beloved and is offering value and modeling the kind of behavior that we think is helpful for the community, then that's an asset that we want to retain. And I think, if the Community Safety Department can be an addition to that, so that there again are more caring adults, then even better. So that's really that proposal. Personally, I feel ready to vote on this today, but again, want to honor where other people might be at. I think this is really clear. And I think the Board of Education is anticipating this proposal in particular. And so offer it for feedback as folks are able.
Thanks, Jesse. I do have one question. What was gleaned from the hackathon, for example, and I think from also the listening sessions that were led by youth, there was a tremendous amount of support for just having more adults in the schools, unarmed adults in the schools. And maybe, that just seemed to be an overwhelming theme. that, am I right, Dr. Boone, that was front and center, that the students want to be heard, want to be in the presence of caring adults. So I hope that's reflected. And also, I would love to hear, I don't mean to put you on the spot, school board member Lewis, but I'd like to, what are your thoughts on this? Is this what you need? Is this what the schools need? For the SRO.
There we go. I texted Jesse. I was like, I can't
Yeah,
come
I
up.
was just about to say, I was like, oh,
I was trying to figure it all out. I don't know what the listening sessions spoke to that point that you're talking about, Marcia. And I think Mike put it in the chat as well about the unarmed officers or ununiformed officers. I didn't hear that as a topic of discussion. And we had a small group out of a certain area in Durham. I do, I have seen conversations and mentor type relationships between SROs and students. What was your last question? Is this what we're looking for?
Yes. Is this recommendation for an SRO MOU? Is there something missing? Is it there?
No, I think that what we were looking for was community feedback and input, community listening sessions. I think that this team has done a good job in getting those executed, analyzing the data and leaning into what the data suggests and recommends. Is not a cookie cutter, do this, don't do that. It is really holistic. And it speaks to the MOU and the language. I think, you all had done a good job, Jesse, you and team, to pull out the different reports, pull out the MOU, pull out our strategy points, and speak to that, right, to those areas. So I think, yeah, it serves, it's what you all set out to do, and this is what you've delivered. Is it what the board members are expecting or looking for? We'll see when that happens, but you can't refute what the community has shared and said. I leave it to Jesse and the team if there's more specific recommendations. But again, was that a large majority, or was that some people out of those listening sessions making those recommendations? Best practices, that's the last thing I will say is I feel like you all have looked at best practices as well as a part of your recommendation. I don't see it specifically off the top of my head, but I do remember some conversations about it. So
yeah, I think in this case, we are relying strategically on a model that we've been able to test in this community, and that's the community safety department. We think that they are doing well. I'm excited that the city manager has already drafted an expansion, and we anticipate that. And with that anticipated expansion, there's much to be discerned, I think, if, God forbid, something happens in the city, school, what's the protocol for engaging with those school stakeholders? What is it for CSD to be activated? How do we leverage the model that already exists to make sure that they're in a position to add value, support our young people, to support the adults serving them? And again, I don't think that we want to get ahead of ourselves and put together some multi-page proposal that people struggle to read and have an ask with a huge dollar amount, and there isn't clarity from the top that will be needed, because that would be a partnership across municipalities. And in our conversation so far, it seems like there's openness to explore that. And so I'm hopeful that after those explorations start to happen at the top, then we'll figure out what it actually looks like to codify that kind of partnership.
And that's what I want to clarify. When I talk about the best practices, I know you say there's a model here.
Yeah.
I don't know how long we've had to look at the impact of that longitudinal as well as working specifically with students in the school. So I'm thinking more of a model in the schools, not what we see here that really has been short term. So I just want to clarify that
I hear
point.
you.
Thank you. Some chats can't, let me get to them too.
Yeah, Dr. Boone.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that this is very clear, and it does, for me, identify specifically what the community has said, what parents have said, what youth have said, and even the Sheriff's Department is talking about trauma-informed workplace for the Sheriff's Office. So this is, I think it encapsulates, the conversations that have gone on, and I think it's great, and I appreciate it.
Thanks you.
Dr. Boone.
Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks. So I did have one quick question, just logistically. So I'm aware that few decades ago, the city school and the county school system merged, but is like anything from the community safety department, a city-run department, able to be dispatched to our schools?
I think that's what is TBD.
Okay.
I think in my mind, I think there is some ground to stand on in realistically imagining it, because we already have a model where the dispatch from 911 routes them calls within their purview.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what hasn't happened is the necessary conversations between the city manager, the county manager, the superintendent, the
Mm-hmm.
sheriff, Ryan, who directs CSD, like making sure that they're actually able to lay out what is happening and what could happen, what should happen, and making it make sense so that there's clarity and agreement for that model that already exists to be extended to the calls that a sheriff might take.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this case, if a partnership is there, agree to offer to CSD, or maybe they're doing it in partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the conversations that I think can happen, will happen, and that this proposal supports happening.
Okay. And I'm processing still a lot of what was shared today. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be so thorough with everything. The last question I have is, did you have an opportunity to consider the calls for service that the Sheriff's Department is already making to schools in addition to any actions by SROs that are there?
I want to make sure I'm hearing you well. Can you ask that one more time?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Just repeat it.
Yeah, like did you have an opportunity to know and or consider what the current calls for service, like sheriff dispatch to schools for reasons, look like currently when sort of discussing these things over with the community?
Not directly, no. I think in some of the community conversations I had with folks, I was made aware of different incidents where sheriffs were being activated because of school discipline issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be very clear, this is what I was told.
Sure.
And so I haven't engaged directly with a DPS stakeholder to confirm this.
Mm-hmm.
But in incidents where a sheriff is being activated to deal with discipline issues, if that feels appropriate, that's under the guidance and leadership of the DPS staff and administration. The MOU makes clear that SROs are actually not the ones to make that call. So if that call is being made, it's being made by, I would understand, a DPS stakeholders who's deferring and allowing the sheriff to then do what a sheriff does.
Okay.
And so again, it feels important to make sure we're engaging and listening well to the decision makers within the DPS administration context to make sure that they have at their disposal unarmed, trauma-informed, adults that can come in as well to resolve, de-escalate, so on and so forth.
Thank you. So the reason why I asked, and I do want to note the note in the chat that data has been shared with the roundtable. So we haven't talked about this very much, mostly because we haven't been able to go through it all, just because there's 4 of us, and we have kids and jobs, and we can only do so much. But we do have at this point almost, excuse me, 2 years of calls of dispatch data from the sheriff that we've scraped from online postings. So it's complete data that is publicly presented by the sheriff's department on their own website. When we did some back of the envelope calculations a while ago, and this was a while ago, and they were back of the envelope, which we haven't really talked about it. But I personally found the number of dispatches for drug and disturbance related calls to Durham schools to be stunning, like really, really stunning. And again, I am not a parent. I am not familiar with the school system. I do not want to make assumptions, and I do not want to minimize any like genuine concerns that may exist in the schools. And I also heard you, and I'm very, very open to the feedback that this is a separate issue to be taken up at a different time. And I don't want to distract from SROs, but I think I would really love feedback from my other roundtable members, so maybe we should discuss this at our next meeting too. But before I make a suggestion, I just want to share that my instinct is that perhaps some of that data should be brought into the conversation so that we mindfully, and I trust you all to do it because this is your issue, just so that we mindfully decide that it is a separate issue, as opposed to just miss it. Or if it is relevant, it can be brought into conversation. I'm very tired.
Yes, you are. You're making a lot of sense. I asked the same question, and and I think in Javon, you can tell, but the schools can call whomever they want. And so I think boundaries, city county boundaries for being able to, for the community safety department to serve any school is possible. It's not impossible by any means. And I think looking at that data is really, really important. We're over time, but I got to hear from Manju.
No, we don't need to go over time. If this is a first reading, we can just continue the conversation in the forum and next session. But yeah, this piece definitely feels like one of the centerpieces of our task, and I would love to put more time into it. Perhaps next session might not be enough. Let's build with each other about it.
Yeah, I think y'all have access to this draft. Javanya, I know you've shared some feedback with other school board members so that they're aware that we're doing this important work. Manju, Jennifer, if this document feels helpful to review within your roundtable, and if there are additional reflections you have based on the data you've been able to collect, then let's figure that out so that it might be, in my mind in this moment, I'm imagining that might be a separate document that goes along with this so that we are really, again, relying on data so that we can lay it all out very clearly. But at the end of the day, we're working together, we're listening, and we're putting forth a set of documents that allows us to make a clearer and more powerful argument for the vision that we're casting and the larger circle that we're drawing. Because I know that there are audiences that feel like this is a us versus them or either or, and we're really trying to make it a both and, really trying to figure out how to take care of one another. And I really appreciate Dr. Boone lifting up the ways that the proposal is actually uplifting things that sheriffs have said. That to me makes me feel like we're doing our best to actually draw that larger circle well to, as Polly Murray would say, include the very people that would exclude us. That sheriffs don't always model how to share power. Law enforcement doesn't always model how to share power. And so here we are doing our best to model what it looks like to share power with the very people that haven't modeled that well, because we're in community. And again, that's what restorative practice and justice, I think, invites us to lean into. So I'm totally open to continue leaning in together and listening well and figuring out how to have a stronger document.
I think so too. And I think that this is exactly what the purpose of this task force meeting is to find out what everybody's thinking and who's got, to just have a mind meld. And I would like to make sure everybody knows there's a Google Doc that Rose has created for us where we can populate it with our questions. We have another research assistant coming this summer starting June 20th. So y'all, we have capacity when you're talking about all that data, Jennifer. If there's something, and also I'd love to draw your attention, please, to Samuel's comment in the text, in the chat, excuse me. Really important that in his experience in so many listening circles, trusted adults in the schools who have genuine care for all students, the skills to adequately support students, like ACEs informed, cultural competency, not to mention language justice, and the willingness to work together with students to create a better school community. Hallelujah. That's it. So thank you, Samuel. We're over time. So if you want to just put a word in the chat, what you're leaving with, I'll read it out really quick, and we'll see each other a lot between now and the next meeting, I hope. And we'll certainly be listening to each other in that Google Doc. Hope. Stamina for the next 5 months. Love, faith. Commitment. I'll say perseverance. Deep appreciation. Caffeine. Hope. Amen. Thank you all. It really is a joy and an honor to serve with you guys. And I'll see you soon, and we'll definitely be together. And we just want to say, I just would like to close in saying that we miss you, Nori and Alejandra and Xavier and Isaac and Shanice. We love you, and we'll see you next month. So blessings to all. Thank you, wonderful officials, for being with